In this lesson, we'll discuss the interface of the basic material editor. Okay, so to access materials of an object, we need to select that object. And then on the right side in the scene information bar, you're going to have the object properties panel or section. And in this section, you're going to have the aspect panel. In the aspect panel, you'll notice that we have our material here, and we can either load a material or we can edit the current material. So let's hit Edit Material to bring up our material editor. Now, by default, it may show up as the Advanced Material Editor here. We want to switch it to the Basic Material Editor. So go ahead and click on that button, and you'll see that we've lost a lot of the options. Now, we're going to cover the Advanced Material Editor in our next lesson, but I figured that this would be a great place to start. So the first thing that we notice about the material editor is that we have a type up here, and this should be the first thing that we determine before we start creating materials. We need to determine if we're going to use a simple material or a mixed material. Now, a simple material is limited to the editing of the color, as you can see here, the color section, the bump, transparency. Now, we could also edit the scale of the maps, the highlight intensity, and even the reflection amount of that material. Now let's go ahead and just create a simple material first, and then we'll talk about all of these different sections, and then we'll move into the mixed materials. So in the color section, we can change the overall color of our object. So let's change this to something like red. Right? And then we'll hit OK. And you'll see that that just changes the diffuse color of our material. You can see that reflected here in the scene here. Now, if we want to add a texture, we check Color Map, and then we'll load a texture. So you can do this by double-clicking on the swatch, or you can click on Load Texture. Now, we're going to have a couple of different collections that we can choose from for our bitmaps or images. We have animation, HDRI, bitmaps, and then terrain brushes. These are all viable. Now, in the bitmap section, this is just default inside of View. If you want to load in your own texture map, you simply go to Browse File and then find the texture map that you want to use. I'm just going to use this brick wall for now, and you'll see that this has been applied to our object here. Now, it looks like it's not showing up in our scene or in our little preview here. One thing that I want to do is change my overall color of this object. So I'm going to right click and hit Reset Color, and you'll see that that shows up there. Now, this overall color will change the color of the texture map overall. So if I change this to something like blue and I hit OK, you'll see how that changes that look of that texture map. So to reset that, right click on the overall color and reset. Now, the next section that we have is the bump section. Now, the bump map or the bump gain and all of this is going to add in a little bit of texture to our maps. So if we want to add a bump map, we just simply check that, and we could choose a bump map that we want to use, or we could use a color map. Okay, and basically it's going to take the information from our color map and put it right in here in our bump map slot. And you'll see that that changes over to a grayscale, thus giving us that bump information. Now, the bump gain we can adjust to get more bump out of our object. Now, if you go too high, it's going to look a little odd. So we want to be very subtle with our bumps. So type in 1 again. All right. And we also have these lower sections here. So scale of the image is going to adjust the texture map itself. And then we also have the highlight intensity, which is going to affect the bump. So if I bump up my highlight, you can see here that I'm getting a little bit more glossy over the entire surface of this object here. Now, finally, we have transparency. Now, we have a global control for our transparency, which we can adjust, and you'll see that it's becoming more and more transparent. Now, we could use a map to adjust our transparency as well. So if I hit check or check the transparency map, I could use the same color map if I wanted, or I could load in a different color. So let me just show you how that's done. Let's hit load, and I'm going to browse a file here, And let's go ahead and find the texture map here. Now you can find this in your project files. So in your project files, you'll see that you have two folders, scenes and textures. Go ahead and open up textures, and you can use this alpha 01 PSD. Now with that applied, you'll see that it's applied this information to our object, and then we can hit OK, and then we'll do a quick render of this, and you'll see that you have transparency information on this. Alright, so let's open up our material editor again, and let's go ahead and just turn off that texture for our transparency map. Alright, so now we have covered the simple material. Let's go ahead and discuss our mixed material. So we have our mixed material brought up, and you'll see what it's done is it's changed the overall hierarchy of this material. So we have a material called default, and then underneath that it's made a copy of that default and then added another material. So we have material 1, which is what we just created, and then we have material 2, which is waiting to be created. So to begin creating material 2, we need to double click on it, and then we see here that we have the same editor as we had before. Now in this layer here, we can switch back and forth between the default that's lower in the hierarchy, and then we have this material here. Now by working on this, we can start to add in more maps and things like that. So let me change my color map, and let's just change it to something like this wood or a different brick. Let's do that. We can add a bump map, use that color map, there we go, and then we'll hit OK. Now we have these two maps that we're mixing here. So at 50%, we can see a little bit of both. We've got kind of this overlay of that brighter red brick, and then we have this underlay of that brownish brick there. Let's hit OK on this and look at this inside of our viewport, and you can see a mix of the two different colors. Now with mixed materials, we have this mixing proportion, so we can have a little bit more of material 1 showing up and then a little bit more of material 2 if we go to that side. Now it looks like it's not really mixing them together, because once we get past 50% on the plus side of that, it's going to really just show material 2. Now if we get on the negative side of 50%, it's only going to show us material 1. So if we want to see a true mixing, we need to give it 50-50 here. Alright, so we've covered the basics of the basic material editor, and in our next lesson we're going to get into the advanced material editor and start talking about all of these different options that we have that's really going to push us in a more advanced direction of creating material. So I'll see you then.